Good afternoon and happy Sunday, fantasy football fans. Welcome once again to the Gridiron Ratings ReDraft Fantasy Football Podcast. Should we call it a podcast? I mean, technically it's a video show.
Are we in audio only yet? I think we're in video. You can see me. You can see Jeff. Our faces are live. It's a show. It's a show for sure.
It's a show for sure. Yeah, I mean, one day we're gonna pull the audio out and launch it as a podcast. We're gonna be doing that. One day it'll hit my to-do list of things I've got to address. I am your host, founder of Gridiron Ratings, Jeff DiMatteo, and I am here with key senior redraft analyst, Matt McCarthy.
When I get all these titles, I got to update my Twitter profile.
I just make these titles up as we go. I mean, I can get you like some business cards or something. I don't know if that'll help.
By this time next week, I'll probably be junior redraft analyst, and it's going to keep everyone on their toes.
Your takes in this show. It's going to really go from show to show. That's I have that kind of power. I pull the string. So, Matt, how are you? Like, what's going on in the world, man? You good?
I'm excellent. I was able to actually guest spot in a little impromptu show for our friend over here, John June, over here on Gridiron Ratings, talking about the Tennessee Titans over on Friday. That was fun. Me vaunted Tennessee Titans fan. Oh, for sure. So that was fun talking about, we're going to talk about one of those guys today, Ryan Tannehill, possibly, maybe.
Well, we call that a spoiler in the business. That's a little bit of a spoiler. So he's already kind of spilling the beans here, but today's show is going to be about quarterbacks. If you're looking for it by title, this is the one where Matt nearly gives me a brain aneurysm over Lamar Jackson. Today we're going to do an overview of the quarterback position. We're going to break it down into a few tiers. We're going to talk about a handful of guys. Some of them will be the elite guys you're already aware of, and you're probably going to have to draft entirely too early to get them on your roster. We'll try to talk about some of the more interesting players too that might be more of those mid-level, even later round guys. And then we might even cover a couple of rookies if time permits. But without further ado, why don't we hop right into it? This episode brought to you by the Gridiron Ratings Draft Guide. Be sure to grab the Gridiron Ratings Playbook today. It is available and live on gridironratings.com. With that, let's talk about our first quarterback. So tier 1 with an ADP of 13, your first guy is none other than Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and it's funny because on episode 1 or the first show, whatever we're calling the debut of this little situation, we actually had he was ADP of 14. He actually went up, and I was really hoping that number went the opposite way. It's a struggle. It's going to be a struggle every single year with whoever the first quarterback is, because for redraft, and again, one thing we like to do here on this show is we like talking to the average fantasy consumer, right? If you're out there in 1-2 leagues, you're going to be playing with just your buddies. A lot of what we're going to be talking about is probably geared towards you, because as much as Dynasty and IDP and all this other stuff that we serve here over at Gridiron Ratings and over across the internet at large, you average guys, you're going to start to take Mahomes way too early, and we got to talk about it every single year. And I just he's the worst value at quarterback for me. That's what I want to just lead it off and get it right out of the way. He is the worst value at quarterback. Jeff, is that a crazy thing to say?
Not at all. We're talking about the 13th pick in your draft, which if you're in a 12-man league, you're talking about picking at the turn. Now, to be fair, you're not going to be picking again until late in the third, right? Like you get the late 1, the early 2, and then you're at the end of the third. So you're missing basically 2 more rounds. Like you can't miss on these picks. I mean, unless you want to put a lot of pressure on yourself later. I mean, you kind of want these foundational players. And while Mahomes is nice, right, I don't know that his lack of a rushing floor justifies the pick there. He's not that, Konami code quarterback that gets you all kinds of additional points for rushing and rushing touchdowns and all of that. He's phenomenal. He's going to be the best passing quarterback in the NFL again, or one of the top ones. But man, without having that little extra pop, he doesn't really separate himself from the rest of the group as much as you'd like him to. At 13, you should absolutely be taking a running back or a wide receiver, or maybe even a guy like Travis Kelce to get some exposure to Mahomes. But man, I'm fading that at 13. No, thank you.
Yeah, and we had a little bit of an uptick in terms of overall quarterback production last year. So in terms of points per game, this is about around 6. I think this is including 6 points per touchdown pass. We had 11 quarterbacks last year at an average of 25 points per game. That's pretty high because considering in 2019 there's only 3, and in 2018 there's only 4. We have just a larger plethora of players who are getting to this plateau that we were once considered, 4,000 yards was being hit by like 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks or so back when I was a child. And I'm mostly still a child in the grand scheme of things. But 500 pass attempts was attempted by 14 quarterbacks last year. That's we're talking about like half the league starters are getting to this pretty insane number that wants to be, was just like Drew Brees was hitting this sort of stuff. 4,000 yards, 11 quarterbacks, 30 passing touchdowns by 10 quarterbacks, and 300 rushing yards, which has been used as the external, like extra little incentive to go out and get a guy, 10 quarterbacks. Now, some of those are a little bit weird because like Taysom Hill kind of gets into that mix and stuff like that and wasn't a true starter for most of the year, but you still have such a large amount of guys that are getting you value that Mahomes at the 13th overall pick, and he might go even sooner than that because we're talking to the average guy, and every single year we say, hey, don't reach for these quarterbacks this quickly. Don't go with this early. I was in a draft last year with my dad and his friends, and Aaron Rodgers was the last pick of the first round. He somehow knew Aaron Rodgers' best season was coming at age 37 or whatever it is. But that's still the kind of guys
runs later.
Yeah, like we're still talking about this is a much worse sort of value than it's been ever because Mahomes he is my only tier 1 quarterback. He is the true pinnacle for the position. But if 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are so much better than they used to be, it makes his value when you have to go and pay such a premium that much worse.
So what's your tier break? What are we using here? Because I know a lot of folks do tier-based drafting and they love it. The only tiers I care about are the ones of my opponents. And so tell me, like, what's the break? Like, what puts him in his own tier versus, say, the next 3 guys on your list?
So Mahomes, I think the Kansas City Chiefs offense currently still the number 1 offense in the league. I think he's going to have the easiest path. And again, I go with the idea of average range of outcomes. I know what a lot of you do here and what we do with the draft guide is talking about projections and actual nitty gritty numbers, right? In my mind, I'm trying to think how easy can he get to a certain points level or certain satisfactory percentage on a weekly basis. Because again, this is a weekly based matchup. We're not, if you're doing best ball, you just take one guy and you have to look at it for the rest of the year. But this is all a weekly sort of situation. So my 2 through 5, which would be the near elite. These are all the guys competing in the dog pile to try and take over Mahomes' number 1 spot. We've got Dak Prescott at 2, Josh Allen at 3, Lamar Jackson at 4, and Kyler Murray 5. And these are a little bit different than you're going to see in the draft guide on gridironratings.com for sure. And then I have Russell Wilson, who's also in this elite tier. He's in a group of himself in tier 3. I do have at times players of 1 tier. And again, I like to think about with tiers, like you're saying, it helps in auction drafts, which we don't really talk about too much, a little bit more of a niche thing. And this is more about snake drafts and all that sort of stuff. But if I'm saying that Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray are all in the same tier, I'm saying in some sense, Prescott is going to be the most successful of that group in this tier 2. And Kyler Murray is going to be the least successful, I think, to try and get to that normal range of outcomes that would get more high success on a weekly basis.
So are we talking like between Mahomes and Dak? Are we talking like 1 point a week, 2 points a week? Like, what defines that level of success? So, because I guess if I'm looking at it, my mantra is points in my lineup. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm looking at Patrick Mahomes at 24 points a week in my lineup at 13, and I can get 22 points a week in my lineup from Dak, and I can get Dak in round 8, like, obviously Dak's a far better value, and I'd rather have Dak. So where's your cut? Do you use any kind of fantasy point cutoff between your tiers, or is it more just about like, I really think these guys can actually land where they're expected to land, and that's how I'm going to break them up?
It's a little bit of a combination of looking at points per game and looking at, the schedule and the offense. It's all takes into account. Is there a physical number? No. Unfortunately, okay. I don't do it by projections. You're very much a numbers guy, and I used to like to think that I was a numbers guy, and then I found Jeff DiMatteo.
I love numbers. I love spreadsheets, and I really probably unhealthy, to be completely honest.
Some people will do so. They will just make the projections early in the year and go off of that, and it's completely fine. It's more of a comfortability, and I'm looking at value, and I'm looking at, sure. There's a few things mixed into it. None of it is our physical number, though, that spits out of a machine, unfortunately. Got it.
That's okay, and that's perfect. That's just so that our viewers, which you keep referring to them as average, I just want you all to know that I think you're definitely above average.
I just like to say that I'm that's a good thing, right? So some people think that because we're over here on camera talking about it, that I have a machine that spit out something like it's something out of Willy Wonka. That's not what I have. That's what you like to do. And there's
don't have a dot matrix printer behind you printing out numbers right now?
I have a Boston Red Sox banner behind me. And there's a wall. That's what I got behind me.
I repurposed an entire bathroom with nothing but supercomputers and dot matrix printers that kicks out all these numbers. That's all it does. That's just fantasy football all day. Let's get back on the rails here.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about some of your quarterbacks. So tier 2, you already mentioned Dak, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. Now, the thing of it is, I look at these 4 guys, and in a way, one of them is not like the rest. I look at Lamar, Kyler, and Josh Allen, and I see much more rushing ceiling, whether it be through touchdowns and or yardage, than I do with Dak. Dak's coming off a pretty devastating ankle injury, and truthfully has the best collection of weapons out of all of these 4 quarterbacks. So how is it that he became separated from the others? Is it because of the weapons?
100%. There is some incentive that people are already doing in terms of ADP and drafting as well. Kansas City and Dallas are currently the only 2 teams that have 4 players being drafted inside the top 50 by ADP via fantasypros.com for redraft full PPR purposes, which is all the stuff that we're talking about here. When I look at Dak, and again, he's not going to have the 250 yards, 300, whatever insane numbers the rest of the guys are actually going to put up. I'm looking at overall passing volume and overall pace of play. So when Dak was actually starting under center and it started and finished a game, they had 3 games of 80 or more offensive snaps. I don't need you to be overly efficient. I don't need you to be throwing 17 touchdowns. When you're having just that much volume and that much, possibility of play to getting fantasy points, that's something that I really like to hone in on. They finished second at 69.6 average plays per game, just 0.4 behind the Chargers, who all season had 5 games of 80 plus offensive snaps. Dallas had 4 of those in the first 6 weeks, and this team fell apart completely without Dak. With Ben DiNucci and Andy Dalton at quarterback, this was not a situation that I was really all in on. You can take that crazy pace, right? So we're going to do some funny math real quick. You want to do some funny math, Jeff?
Man, you're not going to do extrapolation, are you? Where we're going to take that and extrapolate it over a 17-game schedule.
That's 100. That's 100% we're going to do real quick. And there's a better.
A brain aneurysm is definitely the apt title for this episode.
There's a better average pace I'm going to bring up after the fact. But the first one is based off those 4 healthy games, Jeff. Did you know he might have had 804 pass attempts? And he might have had 6,760 yards, Jeff.
I'm dying on the inside. I just want you to know that.
A better pace based off of the averages of his opponents that they would have been playing over the last, 10 or so weeks. He would have, in terms of just based off his numbers from the first, 4 or 5 weeks, in terms of the base averages that opponents were allowing up in terms of completion, yards, and attempts, he would have been around top 5 in all 3 of those categories. Only 27 pass touchdowns, which I feel would be pretty low. Around 341 fantasy points would have been his yearly total. And that's not really including what I think Dallas would have been more apt to do. If he had, like I said, we're talking about teams that were allowing, just around 30 something attempts. We're not talking about Dallas, who was going for 45, 50 something attempts per game. So we're even got a little bit more conservative talking about what an adjusted pace would have been. So those early numbers, yes, that would have been silly because he would have been the record for attempts and the record for yards and all this sort of stuff. That's funny math. We don't like
so many other factors that'll influence those numbers, though. Even the defense being better is going to keep the opposing offense from scoring so many touchdowns so quickly. So just forcing them to do more, I guess instead of 5 play drives for a field goal or a touchdown, it's turning into 8 play drives, 9 play drives, and that eats up the clock. So that takes away opportunity to run some of those plays. So I guess, I can see some of that heightened opportunity. I can see some of the efficiency, but this isn't the same schedule, the same defense. It's not the same really anything.
Oh, of course. Dan Quinn coming over from Atlanta, new defensive coordinator, 8 of their first 11 picks were used on defensive players. Mm-hmm. There was a real revamp here for a team that was 28th in points allowed, that they're not going to be the complete walkover team, but they weren't competitive. A minus 61 differential in the overall games that Dak didn't start. They weren't competitive, so we don't see what an actual back and forth sort of situation looks like. If the defense is better, that's you can only really get better than what they did last year.
They were historically bad. They were one of the worst, probably one of the 3 or 4 worst defenses we've seen in the last 25 years.
And I don't think we saw the actual height of how bad they could have been because Dallas wasn't competitive. Competitive is not a word I would use with Ben DiNucci in the same sentence.
I mean, they could have had Cooper Rush out there. That's all I'm saying.
It seemed like I was out there with some of these passes that are being thrown, but it's a matter of
better.
When I looked at the 2020 schedule, it seemed like every single week Dallas was going to be the game of the week in terms of fantasy points scored on both sides. For 2021, I'm still sort of looking at that in the same light. I know we're talking in the pre-show, going through a lot of their tougher part of the schedule is towards the end part of the year. You have Washington and the Giants kind of sandwiched when you're going into that playoff sort of push. And week 1 against Tampa Bay, you were saying was a bad matchup. I said I actually like that from a fantasy standpoint, going off of what a game script sort of looks like in terms of an offense that really came all together in the second half of the year for Tampa Bay. I like games like that. I like games where I think that Dallas is going to be losing because when you have an offense I think is this high-powered, fantasy points get produced in weird ways. I don't need them to go out and win the game. Dallas can go 0-17. I do not care. I am not a Cowboys fan. But if Dak throws the ball 600 times, I love that.
Sure. Well, okay, I can dig that. And I like Dak. To be fair, when we do our early August draft guide update here, given it's a fully digital piece, Dak's probably going from QB9 to like QB5 anyway. When we did the initial run on the projections and we were kind of drilling down the schedule and his projected outlook, a lot of it was him still trying to work out that ankle. That's a pretty devastating ankle injury to come back from. And having been someone who's gone through a lot of those ankle breaks and fractures, and mine wasn't nearly as bad as his, but I can tell you there's still some rehab time when you're talking about high impact sports. So I'm sure he's going to be fine. I'm no doctor. If you do need injury analysis, I'd actually push you over to Edwin Porras over at fantasypoints.com. He's fantastic. But, let's move on to some other guys. We'll do kind of just a recap. We had Josh Allen in this tier, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. Look, all these guys run, right? They all get touchdowns. We're not really going to spend any time here. We know what Josh Allen is. He's got Steph Diggs, outlier season last year. Probably not going to repeat it, but, man, he gets you enough on the ground that he's worthwhile and he's worth having early. Lamar Jackson, his ADP is really down. He's going to get you dang near 1,000 yards rushing. This is a guy that has to be had. If he slips to you and he's there at ADP 38 and you've already got a couple of running backs and a wideout or a couple of running backs and a tight end or something, go grab Jackson. Give yourself an advantage. He's actually the number 1 quarterback in the draft guide. Kyler Murray, up-and-coming guy still. You get exposure to D-Hop, so you don't have to worry about drafting him early. Another guy gets you a lot of rushing upside. We'll skip right through them. You got Russ here in a tier of his own.
Yeah.
So talk to me. Give me 30 seconds here on Russell Wilson. I know he's got DK. I know he's got Lockett, but why are we drafting him over some other guys?
He has, as of right now, by ADP, the cheapest of exposure to sort of this whole group as it stands. Around like pick 46 is where the last time I saw he was going. If you talk Russ's first half, this is a guy who should be looking as the quarterback 1 for the season. But if you look at Russ's second half, this is a guy that shouldn't be in the top 12. I don't think either halves are the true Russell Wilson. This is a guy who I think is going to be able to break into the 4,000 yards in terms of passing, get you the 500 rushing yards sort of floor, situation you're looking for with these other top guys. Because he feels like what Kyler Murray has been doing, what he's kind of be the price tag for him. Russell Wilson's a cheaper sort of exposure to a similar type of player. I don't think he's going to lead in any sort of category. But if he's going to be the cheapest of this group, which is really what is incentivizing me to go and look out for him, I said last week on a different podcast that I think he's the perfect pick right now at quarterback if he's going to be that much cheaper. He's actually going behind Justin Herbert. So technically he's the 7th quarterback off the board right now. If you're going to be 7th quarterback Russell Wilson, I'm all about that. We don't have to go super into the numbers, but I said if he's going to be dropping this much further and he's a player I think is going to be in that elite or near elite tier, I think that's what makes him such a better pickup than like Patrick Mahomes would be in like round 1. Got it.
Love it. And yeah, I like Russ too. I've actually got him as a top 4 guy this year. So to see him down there with his ADP at 46, like I have no trouble taking him there if I've already, picked up some difference makers at running back and wide receiver. You got a few other guys in the top 12 here. We got Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert. I mean, Herbert, we know what he was last year as a rookie. He gave us some really solid games. He looked really, really good. But new play caller in his second year, instead of being more comfortable in the offense, he now has a whole new offense to learn. How do you feel about that in terms of his second year? Instead of becoming more comfortable, do you think it's like rookie year redo?
I do at least like what coaching tree is coming out of. It's the New Orleans Saints. So as Joe Lombardi was going to be the quarterback's coach over there in New Orleans. Coming to LA, I think it kind of works well with what this sort of scheme has been, which is a little bit more using their tight ends for a few years now. LA has been pretty historic at that, but being able to use Austin Eckler and some very safe passing attempts, sort of going, targeting Keenan Allen. I do like if they can hit this short yardage attack and be successful with it. I do like what Herbert could do. I also am not a fan of what this offensive line is. You can only go up from 32nd by PFF ranking in 2020. If they can go and just push that into the mid-20s, I think we're happy with it. I think LA is a very appropriately ranked team overall, which I think kind of doesn't really say there's much value to be picked up with Herbert. Is a sophomore slump incoming? Possibly. I think he's currently not being taken as such. As he's saying, he's being pushed as a top 50 pick right now and is going ahead of Russell Wilson. So I'm a little bit down in terms of what the overall, at large population is, because I have him at 8th and he's going 6th. But I think this entire team feels very safe and very as to where they're going. And I think they're just pretty appropriately ranked, which doesn't mean you're really picking up value like I think you are with Russell Wilson just prior in saying.
Fair enough. So we've got Rodgers. I mean, everyone keeps talking about will he, won't he? And wait, hang on. We got some stuff coming off the printer. Folks, he's going to play.
Yeah, I think he's going to play too.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell we're all talking about here. He's going to play. The guy's not going to sit out in his age 38 season. Is that how old he is now?
Yeah.
He's no spring chicken here. So he's not going to sit, because if he does, no 38-year-old quarterback is enhancing his skills minus Tom Brady from 38 to 39. And truthfully, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is drinking nearly enough avocado tequila to see that kind of improvement if he sits out for the year. He's also going to be giving up an obscene amount of money. If he sits, he has no trade value. He has no leverage. His contract just tolls over another year. We talk about this kind of garbage with some hotshot player every year. The guy flipping plays. You heard it here first, maybe fourth. I don't even know anymore because everyone I feel like is talking about this topic. So educate me on Aaron Rodgers and why I need to go ahead and draft him as if all this offseason nonsense has never happened. Yeah,
it's going to be a problem. Well, I just want to say one real quick. 38 is how old Jeff DiMatteo is. So him saying he's not a spring chicken.
God, geez, how are you going to put me on Front Street like that? I dye my hair. I don't dye my hair. There's some gray right there, actually. Never mind. Forget it.
I had to make sure I got that in. So here's the thing with Rodgers. He won't move up my rankings. He's currently 7th at quarterback. I think he plays. I'm ranking the rest of the Packers as if he plays. Maybe the only one to really move around a little bit is Tunyon, but that's more to a sense that I don't think he was going to go out and have double-digit touchdowns. Packers, actually only team last year to have 3 offensive players all to score in the double digits in touchdowns. This was a touchdown machine. So there's just some incentive for me to think that they're going to take a little bit of a step back, because Rodgers, I think, finished as the first or second quarterback in terms of what your scoring system was. But a 76% touchdown efficiency in the red zone is the highest that I've read in the last decade. That is insanity. Yep. Over 75% of the time you're getting into inside the 20, you're converting 6. That is crazy to me.
Unless you're in the playoffs and you decide to kick a field goal, right?
That makes it so much worse. I hate talking about the Packers because it's such a frustrating team to how that season ended. And I understand why he's so pissed, right? So he goes on Jeopardy and it feels like I have to stop talking about being an analyst for a second and just be like a fan of the NFL. Why? This is a team, if you're having such a historic season in terms of getting to the 20, and that is your whole bag is getting touchdowns. And I don't know. I don't know what metric said that kicking the field goal was there. It breaks my brain, and you could tell when my brain's broken because there's no coherent words coming out.
That's okay. We'll get you off this topic.
I will say one quick. I do have one question.
Hit me.
So you say that Rodgers is playing. I say Rodgers is playing. Yeah. But let's say you're still somewhat worried and you're doing redraft a bit earlier. Again, we have until September to technically figure out. if Rodgers is technically under center for the Green Bay Packers.
Sure.
Are you drafting Jordan Love as a quarterback handcuff?
No. Sorry. No chance. But here's the thing.
I'm not either.
as a prospect, I was not high on Jordan Love. I didn't have him anywhere near being a first-round quarterback. I don't know what he's been doing in camp. I don't know how his practices have looked. I mean, maybe he's been coached up and some of the, footwork and accuracy things have been, touched up a little bit. But in my history and experience, when quarterbacks struggle with, varying degrees of accuracy on almost all routes at the collegiate level, that's not usually something that gets fixed at the NFL level, especially in, a year. So that's a hard no for me, dog. But I will hedge. I'm not afraid. If I take Rodgers and if I'm taking him at ADP, I am not afraid to hedge. And I'm not afraid of, if I'm sitting there around 14, 15, 16, and it's either a dart throw upside wide receiver or a quarterback 2 just to protect myself, I might take a quarterback 2, and I might even take a risky guy. If your league's passing on Deshaun Watson, I might go just take the 2 high-risk guys, get Rodgers, get Watson. One of them's going to be playing, and no matter which one does, they'll both be really good if they're on the field.
I will then ask you, because I think Deshaun Watson, if he stays in Houston, and there's a player we're going to talk about a little bit that's been linked to him, do you think Deshaun Watson, with no trade, plays this year in the NFL, not even including the off-season allegations that are currently brought against him? Do you think he plays for the Houston Texans? I think if there's no, NFL sanctions brought against him or outside sanctions from the law, which I'm not saying whatever too. I'm just saying if he does or does not play, and I actually don't think he plays for the Houston Texans. He does not suit up for them. I'm with my current thinking, it's not him.
Well, here's the problem. Somebody still has to come with a heavy-duty offer, and no team is going to make a move until the NFL says one thing or another. Now, pure speculation. I know nothing. No one ever seems to know what's going on in these situations, so pure speculation. The NFL hits him with a 6-game suspension just because of the nonsense that's gone on. Whether they reach a plea agreement, he gets exonerated, whatever that looks like, I don't know. The legal side be damned. NFL strictly says, you know what? At a minimum, you're seeing 6-game suspension. If he's carrying 6 games, it hurts his value in a trade. Maybe even if only a little bit. If he decides to sit and Houston can't trade him or doesn't want to trade him, he only impedes his ability to get out of Houston further. If he shows up and he balls out for 10 weeks and then pushes it next offseason, and people are like, well, damn, Deshaun Watson's still a top 5 quarterback and he's 26 years old and he's under contract and his value goes back up through the roof. And Adam Schefter made a reference this week to the Philadelphia Eagles.
A little bit of Eagles hate here on the Gridiron Ratings Podcast.
I don't even hate the Eagles. I really don't. I mean, I have an Eagles Reggie White jersey over the shoulder right here. Like I don't really hate them. I do hate the Phillies though, being a Mets fan. So there's that.
Hey,
but
Mets right over here.
There you go. Yeah, all my baseball stuff's actually out over there. But anyway, that's not here nor there. He made reference to the Eagles being a team to watch for in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. And that makes all the sense in the world because they are, barring a catastrophe, going to have 3 first-round picks in 2022. And I don't think we've seen 3 first-round picks for a team since the Jets in 1999 when they took Pennington, Ellis, and Abraham.
I wasn't even watching football at that time, so I got no idea they're champ.
Well, I was in high school, and I don't know why I remember it so vividly. But anyway.
I was 5.
That's twice. That's 2. That's twice. You've made me feel old on this live show right now.
So next week, your new analyst will not be me.
Well, you're going to go from senior analyst to junior analyst, it would appear. So the fact is 3 first-round picks gives them plenty of leverage. It puts them in a position where they can go get Watson and not necessarily give away the entire draft because they'll have the Colts first-rounder, assuming Wentz plays most of the snaps this year. They'll have the 49ers first-round pick from the Trey Lance trade, and then they'll have their own pick. And nice. I see what you did there. Junior analyst, Matt. Good grief. But anyway,
we're having fun.
We are having fun. It's a good show. We've been having a good time so far. So the ability for them to make moves and then potentially even include Jalen Hurts in the trade if he plays well only lifts the kitty further. Now, the trick with this is that Houston has to actually want to trade him. And they may tell him to kick rocks because he's under contract.
Yeah, it's tough because this is a guy who we should have been talking about by now. If Deshaun Watson there was no situation going on and everything was still kind of playing. And I don't still love this team, but I think Deshaun Watson's name would have been brought up at some point here because this is a guy who, in terms of both the rushing and the passing, he's a guy he sets the world on fire. He is just as good as Mahomes, just as good as Dak, just as good as Jackson. He's in this group.
Yep.
This team around him, I understand why he doesn't want to play.
Dumpster fire.
I get that.
Yeah, realistically, Houston dropped the ball because they would have known about this before it went, into the public, sphere. Like, to think that they didn't already have some information on this is, I don't want to say ignorant because that's really rude, but it would be probably short-sighted to think that Houston doesn't have a gauge on that kind of thing, especially when there's, legal issues abound. They have their own investigators and all that. They knew this was going on. They should have dealt him when they had the chance. The 49ers, for example, would have given up picks and players, and the Broncos and the Eagles, and there was all these other teams that were willing to hop in, the Dolphins, and they chose not to. They rebuffed everybody's offer, and now the market is shrank to Denver and Philly. And Denver, I don't want to send him to Denver from Houston. Why do I want that guy in my conference? You flipping kidding me? No way.
I would love it personally, but
well, to be realistic, if I'm, the Houston Brain Trust, I'm sitting here saying, well, I'm going to trade my 25-year-old franchise quarterback. Let me trade him in conference.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so I get to see him more frequently than if I send him to Philly and see him like every 6 years or whatever it works out to. You're sending him to Philly and you're getting a better return. But then does Deshaun want to go to Philly?
He's just disgruntled. He's really just mad at the whole situation because he thought the organization really let him down. He wanted to be the franchise quarterback. He wanted to be in Houston, and then Hopkins for a bag of peanuts. JJ Watt, a leader in the locker room and leader, the face of that franchise for X amount of years. Watt's not what Watt used to be, but Watt still matters a lot to both the fandom, to the organization, to that whole entire leadership. He looks like the last guy on the boat. And he's not the captain. He doesn't want to be the captain anymore. He's not going down with this ship.
Right.
It stinks. It stinks because they did a really bad job of trying to A, incentivize him to stay, and B, even handling this situation if they're going to move him outside. Jalen Hurts makes sense if they want to get that back. It just does it all like all the pieces actually fit because this is what Hurts' second year. We understand why. If you move from a franchise quarterback, you'd like to get back a franchise quarterback. And
if they got 2 ones and a guy they think can be their quarterback in return, like that's a huge win. But we'll see how that plays out. But we're getting a little tight on time, so let's go ahead and we'll drop the Deshaun Watson thing. We hope that the legal aspect of it gets squared away sooner rather than later, so the NFL can get moving, so us fantasy players can figure out if we're going to be trying to roster him or not. Let's shoot to the next group here. So we've got Matt Stafford, we've got Ryan Tannehill, Tom Brady. In that 3, let's keep this real brief. Stafford has the worst weapons. Tannehill has the most exciting weapons, and Tom Brady has probably the most reliable group around him. What say you?
Stafford, in terms of where he's going, is what I love most about where. That's pretty much it. Like when you get into this part, now we're not talking about going out and picking up the guy you want. Now it's where are they falling to? Right. So QB 13, if Stafford's not even taken as a top 12 quarterback, he's my favorite of this group just based on that. I actually have him ranked highest of the group. I do have, some faith in this offense, but I'm not going to talk too much about just really past, top 12 in yards. Sis McFay took over in 2017, top 12 in points, 2017 and 2019. Yeah. If Goff could do this, Stafford can do this. Probably has the, like I said, worst weapons of the group, but worst is just, compared to these 3 because you have, AJ Brown and Julio and Godwin and that's not bad weapons. They're just not as good weapons.
If I'm comparing these 3, and I like Stafford and I love the landing spot, and I think he's going to see a little bit of a renaissance of his own career, which is great. But if I'm looking for fantasy purposes and I'm like, well, Stafford, and he gives me, exposure to Cooper Kupp, Bobby Trees, Tyler Higbee, and like the receiving work of Cam Akers, as opposed to Ryan Tannehill, where I'm getting exposure to AJ Brown and Julio Jones, 2 guys that are arguably top 15 wideouts. I think I'd rather have Tannehill. If I'm comparing him to Brady and you've got Evans and Godwin and Brown and whoever's playing tight end, whether it be Gronk or Howard or whoever, like give me Brady just because I want exposure to all those other great players that based on ADP, we're already telling you and that the market's already telling you they're going to be good. The offense is going to be good. So it seems like Stafford should be falling well behind those guys.
I do retort in a word. Yes, I bring out a SAT word real quick. I will just incentivize him over a player who might be bottom 5 into overall pass attempts in Tannehill, because this has just been an overall efficient. If the Titans go 5%, 10% more pass attempts per game, yeah, we're seeing crazy stuff happen. They're going to get over 500 in the 17-game season just based on just pure numbers, but they just hit the line in terms of, I think, acceptable pass attempts per game last year, 30 per game. So with 480, can we move that obviously to 510? If we can get towards 525, 530, any sort of number more than what the Titans have been doing, because this has been the run-heavy team for the last few years. Vrabel has really incentivized just running attack, keeping the ball safe, slowing down the pace. That's all about it. So Tannehill is just fighting with Stafford, I think, in terms of that. And then Tom Brady, yeah, I love the fact they just went out and won a Super Bowl at 43. But now he's going to be 44.
Don't care.
I'd like to at least talk about that a little bit, because first half of the year, yes,
he's an android. It doesn't matter.
I like to say that for like LeBron, right? Because now we're getting a little bit into, I think, past numbers, right? We're talking about what the mainstream media likes to do. They like talking about like storylines and methodology and all this incentive stuff, right? All that crap. I just can't see what the overall ceiling for a player is at 44. Through the first 11 games, yeah, there was ups and downs. 5 of the games were under 20 points, 5 of the games over 25, with 3 of 35 plus. Yeah, there was the ups and the downs of trying to learn a pretty complex system that they say over there with Bruce Arians for Tampa Bay. And then this team hit its stride when Antonio Brown was added to the situation. He was actually leading that team in red zone targets of those 3 main receivers over the last 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then go into the playoffs, where, yeah, it was like, oh, okay, no, this is the team to win now. Is it them or Kansas City? Like, it's just still a little hard for me to love the ceiling of a player at 44. That's at least fair, I think.
Well, if you're going to take, so we talked about Rodgers and kind of hedging your bet, right? You do the same thing with Brady. Now, if I'm doing it with Brady, I obviously just want a younger guy, and I'm willing to take somebody who's a little bit different. And I have a visitor in the room, so if you hear any background noise, my 2-year-old just rolled in here. And no telling what's going to happen next, by the way. But I might handcuff Brady if I grab him early enough. I do want exposure to all those Buccaneers wide receivers. They're all too good. Go ahead and give me a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance, maybe even a Trevor Lawrence. Like, grab one of these other guys, right? And, they might not play the first couple of weeks, but you're going to run Brady out there the first 3-4 weeks anyway. And if he falls on his face, well, good news. You're going to go ahead and you're going to pop in, Trey Lance or Justin Fields when they finally get handed the rock, and those guys are expected to kind of blow up right out of the gate, or you could even go and grab, maybe it's, your league. You keep referring to everybody being so average. Maybe they're leaving Tannehill on the vine. Yeah. Stop insulting everybody.
Yeah. You're hanging out to dry real heavily right now. Hey, I have called you old twice. Yeah.
So. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Back on the rails. This train's out in the sand right now.
I do like Brady with one of the names you did mention. I think Lawrence depends on if he's going to go, because currently he's not going to top 12. So right. Lawrence has not shown up yet. I know he was possibly the best sort of QB, talent to come out of college, maybe since like Andrew Luck.
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
So, but he's currently not top 12. So I like that, because if you're someone to take Brady, or you're taking, Rodgers, or maybe you don't like what Hurts could be, because Hurts is currently going as QB 10, comparing him with Lawrence, because, in redraft, if you really want to go all the way in the barrel down to Lance and Fields, because technically for our purposes, they're not draftable.
Right.
They are not the starters for a team. They're not the starters for week 1. For us, we're not looking at them. Dynasty, yeah, go nuts. The Dynasty podcast for us must love them. But for our purposes, those are not names we're looking at. Lawrence,
those rookie quarterbacks.
So Lawrence really fits that bill, I think. There's a lot of question marks, I think, in Jacksonville right now. I'm not a particular big fan of Urban Meyer. I think this is a possibly high explosive offense. I do like what the weapons platter is, like charcuterie board, if you will. But yeah, we're bringing all
fancy. That's way fancier than record, by the way. I think that was well done and well placed.
But this is a team I think I do like Jacksonville in terms of what between him and Etienne being picked up in the first round, what can the pass attack be? I still think this is a bottom 3, 4, 5 defense. So if we're looking at the real, we talk about with the Dallas, where this is, every game's going to be, trying to push the pedal because they have to. I think Jacksonville literally needs to do that. Otherwise, they're going to get smoked. But that's my look on it.
Yeah, I mean, I can dig it. And I'm not real big on the rookie quarterbacks for redraft. I mean, the only way I would consider one is, and truthfully, I love Lawrence. I really do. But if I'm looking at Brady and say by week 6, week 7, week 8, he's just falling on his face and Father Time's finally found him, and Trey Lance gets announced as a starter in San Francisco, I'm willing to take a flyer on that guy simply to get, exposure to Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, that run game's super efficient. Like that offense just seems like it's such a great position for a young quarterback to come in and succeed right away. Fields, that offense isn't really geared as much to immediate success, but I think his athleticism separates him and he becomes a really dangerous runner, could help you out where, hey, he gets you 10 points a week just on the ground. And then he throws for a few.
Yeah, in that Bears schedule, I will say, because if Lance was announced a starter right now, I think he's top 15. He goes ahead of Lawrence for me. That's my favorite rookie fantasy quarterback. Okay. For Fields in Chicago, this is a pretty you don't have a lot of good stretches of time where you're facing, like 2, 3 sort of like, can he get some consistency rolling? I think that's pretty important for a rookie. There's always seems to be like a hiccup, like every like second or third week. Because, some people don't like looking at overall schedules and look at the analysis to say what is, what's the overall ranking for what their schedule difficulty is going to be. The Bears currently have a bottom 5 overall, like in terms of ranking. Like, so this is bad. 1's good. Like, 27 to 32 is bad. They're facing the Rams in week 1, the Browns in week 3, Packers in week 6, which was good against the pass, like really good against the pass. Tampa Bay, which I think would be a little bit different situation for a rookie quarterback against Dak. We're talking about, it's bad for week 1 for Dak. 49ers, Steelers, Ravens, like all in this block from between their 6th opponent in the Packers to their 10th opponent in the Ravens. All those teams are just not going to be fun. And it might actually to take that into account for like Allen Robinson, Dave Montgomery, all those other guys. They have a month and a half stretch here where you're really not a fan of starting Chicago Bears, like at all.
and yeah, I guess it's going to be Lance. It's going to be Lawrence. And how about I've got one more guy in mind that's going to go super late. And I think he's got good weapons. What about Daniel Jones? As a guy you can use as your other guy.
So would you like to talk about Daniel Jones? Did you know that is a top 10 ranker for Daniel Jones this year, and I don't know why. I think Daniel Jones has the best offense he has ever had. Now, is he in a make it or break it scenario in 2021? Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. But if you like Saquon, if you like Galladay, even to the the modest extent, this is the year for him to actually show out. You might as well, because some people say in the contract year that they're going to be extra incentive for a player to go out and produce or go out and put up bigger numbers. Sure. Might as well be a contract year for Jones. He needs to pay back that top 6 pick billing that he had when he was drafted.
I think it was the 6th pick.
So this is he needs to show up. There's no more, he didn't have Saquon. The receiving core wasn't good. You have Evan Ingram, who was technically an all-star or whatever the hell they used for the Pro Bowl. He was a Pro Bowler. There you go.
Pro Bowler. Yeah.
There. I'm stuck in baseball mode. You have at least 3 receiving options I think are acceptable. And Evan Ingram, Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard, mix in Kadarius Toney, mix in Darius Slay, all that sort of guys, right? And sure. Saquon is still, if you're going to get back to what 2019 Saquon Barkley was, which was 121 targets and 91 receptions and all that fun stuff, then you still have to think, or is it 2018? Regardless, 18. If you like Daniel Jones even a little bit, I think people are just a little disrespectful to him because he's kind of, he's kind of goofy. I get it. It was a bad pick probably, but this is the year to go out and do it. I have him as my QB 17. I'm really high on him. That's right behind Trevor Lawrence, and you can get him. I think
can outpace projections for sure. Here's the thing. I always try to balance out like, okay, where's the quarterback ranked? How do we like the quarterback, and how do we like his weapons? You can't love all of a guy's weapons and then hate him. It just doesn't make any sense because the calculus doesn't work. So at the end of the day, Daniel Jones makes for a really nice QB2. He's a waiver wire guy. You can stream him. You can use him when if or when Brady falters, if or when A-Rod doesn't show up, if or when Deshaun Watson doesn't get cleared and he gets banned from the NFL forever. Like all of those weird scenarios, if you decide to, swing for the fences on one of those other guys, he becomes your kind of security blanket, if you will. And he's going to be solid. He'll be okay just because of those weapons. So I think we can probably leave that one there because we're up against it now.
One more name. Just that point you're talking about if you're going to have a guy that has 3 weapons in the top 75 and all ranked in ADP in the top 30 in receivers, Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's one of the higher possibilities to go out and throw for 600 pass attempts. He's another one I want to just throw in there real quick.
I think all of his weapons are actually painfully overrated, and I'm keeping Ben buried. That's me. So I'm going the other way on that, and I'm like, I don't love Ben. It's actually going to hurt his weapons. I don't love it.
100% fine.
But with that, I am Jeff DiMatteo, the host of the Gridiron Ratings ReDraft Podcast show, YouTube video, whatever we're calling this thing. With me is junior analyst Matt McCarthy.
Let's see if Matt makes it out of the doghouse next week on Gridiron Ratings.
Yep, be sure to tune in next week. See if Matt comes out of the doghouse. Check us out, gridironratings.com. Be sure to take a look at the draft guide. Get ready. August is coming. Draft season starts in earnest. If you have any questions or if you need us, go ahead and subscribe. Leave something in the comments for us. We will address it on the next show. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye.